Brave Little Toaster is an underdog story, and its creation is exactly the same. Here's director Jerry Reese with the story of The Brave Little Toaster. Chapter 1, Building a Toaster.
Gosh, I had been working for 5 years straight with Brad Bird and then with Gary Kurtz and a number of other Disney friends who had chimed in. We were trying to get Will Eisner's The Spirit off the ground as an animated feature, and we were just so desperate to make a mark in filmmaking with animation. And it was at a time where, animation was really sort of fading as a force. We were so inspired. In 1977, we piled into a van and went to watch the Star Wars premiere. And we all just came out, and people like John Musker and Doug Leffler and Brad Bird, a whole bunch of us compared notes later. And that was a pivotal night for us, like coming out back onto the boulevard and just going, oh my God, it's like filmmaking can be that. And I wish I was part of it. And then we go like, we just have to make it that. And so we got really inspired to push animation in the same way that Walt and their generation had really pushed it into the mainstream of filmmaking back in the day. And the veterans were all, by the way, coaxing us to still do that. They were middle management, not so much, but boy, I'll tell you, the veterans, the remaining members of the 9 Old Men team were passionately encouraging us to follow our muse and discover new things and to do filmmaking and character development that drew from our own lives and everything. So we were passionately trying to make that happen. And it just, again and again, we would get pushback from what was going on at the main studio. So even though we were inspired by our Disney history and Disney artists and all of that, we were seeking, following the Disney spirit outside of Disney, because we felt like inside of Disney at the time, that wasn't being allowed. So for 5 years.
In 1939, Detective Denny Colt broke 19 previously unsolved cases, which eventually led to the arrest and conviction of 37 of the most wanted criminals in Central City. He was the city's single most effective crime fighter. Needless to say, a lot of people wanted him dead.
Brad and I had been really pushing to get The Spirit made as an animated feature. And it was film noir and just going to be, we saw it as something that would fit into the filmmaking style of Lucas, Coppola, and Spielberg at the time. And we were like, we just want a film that fits into their style of storytelling, and we don't want to be considered a babysitting tool and all of that. So we had pushed really hard. A bunch of people like John Musker and Harry Sabin and Daryl Rooney had helped us put together a trailer of coming attractions for The Spirit. And a friend of ours found a way to get Gary Kurtz to see our trailer. Now, we couldn't take it all the way to color. It was just in pencil test, but you got the idea of the tone of storytelling. And so I animated on it, Brad did, and Harry and John and a bunch of people animated on it. Glenn Keane even helped us out with some of that development work for The Spirit. And Gary Kurtz fell in love with it, and he understood. So as soon as I was finishing up work on Tron, I moved up to Marin County, and Brad and I were full-time working on trying to get The Spirit going with Gary Kurtz as our angel investor. And it's just, man, we encountered so many problems where people would love the script. They would love the idea. We were between the two of us, we were about 80% storyboarded for the entire feature. And studios would go, love the film, read the script, let's make it. And then they'd find out it was animated and go, oh, it's a cartoon. It's like, nobody will come see it, film noir cartoon. We're like, well, you like the script, so people will come. It's like, yeah, but that's for kids. No, it's not for kids. It's the best filmmakers in animation never made it for kids. They made it for themselves and for everyone. So we just kept getting delays. And after 5 years of pushing, and just starving to do something creative and innovative, Gary was going through bankruptcy. So I went in and gave him a little talk about how he needed one less check to fill out every week. So I was going to resign. But I said, believe me, Spirit happens. I'm back in a heartbeat. Would love to do that film with you. And so part of me was doing him a favor. And part of me also really just said, I don't want to I want to make sure that whatever I create tomorrow isn't sort of owned by somebody who's going bankrupt. So I just sort of was partly protecting myself to resign at that moment. So anyway, as soon as word spread that I had resigned and it was back on the market, Tom Wilhite called and just said, I want you to fly down. I want to meet with you. I was up in Marin County. And he said, there's a film that I really want you to look at. And he had, when he was back at the studio, he had taken the Brave Little Toaster novella under his wing. John Lasseter had championed it. And so Tom thought, yeah, this would be really unique and charming. And he loved that it was from a science fiction author and not the standard sort of kids' fair stuff. And that appealed to him. He'd been involved with, Tron, and he was looking to really set a different tone at Disney. So he developed it for a while. He brought in Joe Rampton, Brian McAtee, and they started the process. But then things fell apart at the studio. Lasseter was let go, and Tom Wilhite and his producing partner Willard Carroll left Disney as well. And Tom and Willard took the Brave Little Toaster property with them, but they didn't reunite with Lasseter when they left. They called me, and so Wilhite just said, "Look, we rescued this. It was starting to be developed at Disney. Some people had faith in it, a lot of people didn't. But the state that it's in now, a lot of people think this would make a really nice short film, but it's not a feature. And inanimate objects, it's carrying the whole story. It's like that, that would never work as a feature." And he just said, "Look, I believe it could become a feature in the right hand. So what I'm asking you is, can you develop and write and direct this as a feature? Secondly, I have hardly any money to give you or to the film." But he said, "What I can give you is creative freedom." He had seen me and Brad spend 5 years trying to get the Spirit off the ground, and that hadn't happened. So I think he was feeling like, okay, if there ever was a hungry filmmaker that's like poised to want to do something, it's got to be this guy. So, and he was right. I just said, absolutely, yes, I will do it.
Hang on to your hats, you devil dogs, because the master blaster of all time is going to give you a soul injection.
Chapter 2, The True Beginning of a Journey.
As it turned out, the entire film for 90 minutes, we had $2.25 million, $2.2 million for the whole thing. So yes, there was hardly any money. He just said, "Here's the novella," and he said, Joe Rampton and Brian McAtee are ready to continue working with you. That they were going to start working with John, but there was very little done. So, are you cool with that? I said, absolutely. And then he had also, Van Dyke Parks poised for songs and David Newman poised for score. And so I just gave a big thumbs up. Those were his only, here are things I'm bringing to the table. And I said, love all of that. So, but other than that, he just said, read the novella, figure out a story structure that will support a feature, and write and direct it. And I will be your main producer. I got to say, it's the most creative freedom I've ever had.
Chapter 3, Reworking the Story.
I know some people look at it and go, "Oh, well, there was a book," or "Oh, wasn't it developed before?" And it's like, I'll tell you, it was the Etch-a-Sketch, like erase the screen, start over thing. We put up new index cards. There were aspects to the story that we just invented in 4 weeks while we were doing index cards on the board. I just huddled with Joe Rampton and Brian McAtee. And so I was really troubled by the fact that they didn't wind up reunited with the master, their owner who had abandoned them. It's like, that didn't happen in the story. I was like, well, I would like that to happen. But then there was the logic of how can someone who truly did abandon them for years, like, how is that a happy reunion if they're that delinquent? And then So then it was like, oh, what if it's the kid of a family where, kid playing with the appliances? It's like how many of us rode on vacuums back in the day when that was a thing, when we were little toddlers. And so what if the main attachment, as it were, to the appliances were from a little kid? So then if that's the one they're bonded to, then of course, if the family moves away, that the kid who they bonded with is blameless. He didn't abandon them. His family moved away. So it's like, okay, invent that new thing, put the kid in. And then, when they finally get there, the kid being older shows the passage of time. So that could be cool. Oh, what if the irony is he's just about ready to leave because he's growing up. So he's going to college. So as soon as they arrive, he's leaving. But wait, what if he needs stuff and he goes back to the cottage to get them, and they don't know that he adores them that much, and he bothers to go back to the cottage, and they left because they went to go find him. Oh my God, ships that pass in the night. Wouldn't that be cool? It's like none of this was in the original story. And then when I had first walked in and just looked at the concept art and, the wonderful, charming sketches that Joe and Brian had, one of the things that caught my eye was Brian McAtee's junkyard. It was just the towering cars and everything was tremendously epic and haunting. But it was in the middle of the story. It was like one of the things they get by and they continue on their journey. And I just went, oh my God, that's the graveyard, man. That's the end. That's you die or you live. And that's like shove that to the end of the story, man. So now that's shoved to the end of the story, which wasn't in the original novella or the development that came before. Now you've put, well, okay, the kid's out looking for them. They're not there. What if they're in the junkyard and he comes looking for them? And then that gave birth to a key moment where, the now teenage master gets practically killed, and the toaster sacrifices itself by leaping into the gears to grind this huge machine to a halt and save his life. Like that moment of the toaster being brave, like earning the title, the brave little toaster, that moment of bravery, that was not in the original film or the development either. So that was all of this stuff was just born in the 4 weeks that I sat and huddled with them. So it really became shake the etch a sketch, start over, get new stuff happening, and then trying to figure out not only story, but of course characters drive story. So who the characters really were was something that we pushed in that 4 weeks of development too. And, we sat with them and went, well, in the story, it's kind of all this charming, wonderful ensemble, but now we have to really deal with them as individuals. So what really would make each one special? So that thing of, well, obviously the toaster's really warm and maybe they all feel comfortable because they see themselves reflected in toaster's chrome. So there's kind of this psychological comfort they all have.
We're going out to find him.
What? What are you talking about? What do you mean?
Exactly what I said. We're gonna go out and find the master.
To the city?
Yeah, no matter what.
So, that was the toaster. And then, the lamp, we thought, well, that'd be fun to have a lamp that imagines itself bright, but is kind of dim.
I think he was laughing at us.
You know something? You're a real bright little lamp.
Oh, thanks. Hey.
And the radio that's always on, always the entertainer. And
I'm thinking you think too much, pal. What we need is some wake-up music. So when it's raining, have no regrets, because it isn't raining rain, it's raining vile.
And the security blanket that becomes an insecurity blanket without the kid around anymore. So it's always expressing its insecurity.
But I don't want a new master. I want our master.
And the vacuum, its function in life is to hold things inside. And of course, if you do that too long, you have a nervous breakdown. So having that be its personality.
Cry, weep, wail, and sob. It's disgusting. Every time, I can't believe it.
The air conditioner character, for quite some time, we didn't have a specific handle on it. And so this thing started happening where Tom Wilhite would bring by people that were potential investors for the film, because he was trying to put together little bits of money here and there to help fund us as we went along. So occasionally we'd be working, and then we'd be interrupted by Will going, okay, a potential investor is coming by at 10 o'clock. I need you to like pitch storyboards to him and get him excited. And so Joe and I would tag team and present to the people. And so Joe would get up and do all the voices for his board, and I would get up and do all the voices for my board, and we would just go back and forth like that. And we found ourselves, very sort of grounded in all the characters except for the air conditioner, and we would just make him kind of grumpy in a general way, but we didn't really have a take on him. And it's weird when you're up there having to perform and you're like, oh, I'm suddenly kind of lost with this character. I mean, I'm getting the point across, but it doesn't really sing. And then both of us kind of did a little bit of a Nicholson thing, so we just would try doing it during a presentation, and it just made people laugh. And I suddenly in my head I was like, Joe, this is beyond just funny. That this is now appropriate, like the other characters are appropriate. The air conditioner is cool. Who's more cool than Nicholson? And it's kind of above everyone else, and attitude. And by the way, is mounted above everyone else in the wall, which makes him feel, on the one hand, sort of lofty and better, but then also left out and isolated and paranoid and not included in what's been going on. So it was like, bingo, that hit. So I was like, write it as Nicholson. I just went to my office, locked the door, wrote that entire scene in that voice. So, you got to have a combined wattage of 5, maybe less. All of that stuff which just tripped Nicholson just came out in one writing session. And I unlocked the door, handed out the pages, and just boom, we went forward.
You guys really have an attachment for that kid, don't you?
Yes, he was a master.
Well, that's real nice. And any day now he might come romping back, huh? Just come whistling right back in through that door and everything'll be the same. Real peachy keen like.
So, digging into those things gave us a real handle on the dynamics that would happen in a scene. It was no longer the group does this, the group does that. It became these characters within the group have conflicts or agreements, and it sort of energized the writing process, which followed quickly. And then, of course, I was just writing and storyboarding. So there were 4 of us storyboarding the film, trying to keep ahead of the rest of the production, and I was writing, desperately trying to keep up with the boarding. And so Joe Ramp, Daryl Rooney, Alex Mann, and myself were boarding, and I would go lock my office and write pages ahead, and then hand them out to me and to the other people to keep boarding. And I must say that Joe, I would sometimes send him ahead to go like, hey, can you explore stuff they might do when they're stuck in the thicket? And he would come back with sketches and go, oh, the radio's like, he's like drawing a line in the sand, and like nobody crosses this line. And it's like, oh, that's cool. And I put that in the script, and I went to the producer and I said, I really want to give Joe co-writer credit, just because along the way he's peppered in so many cool things that it would be unfair for me to call myself sole writer, even though that's what the producers had given me. So then, so it's like writing slightly ahead of the boards and boarding slightly ahead of everything else. And there was no time to put together full reels and have test screenings and decide what works or didn't work and change and adjust and all of that. It was just like laser focus. What's the story you want to tell? What is the moment with the characters? What do they say? How do you show it? How does it make you feel? All the way down to once I was in Taiwan, sitting with the editor, it was his first time using a flatbed editing machine, and putting together the story reel for every single panel. So I would sit there with the editor, and he'd use a grease pencil to mark the film. I'd go like, okay, cut to the next panel now. Okay, go, roll it back. It went a little past, roll back about 10 frames. Okay, mark it with the grease pencil there. Okay, now let's go back and watch. And you'd watch it, and it'd be like the flash of the grease pencil, and go, oh, wait, 2 frames earlier. So, and then finally, like, okay, that's it. Make the cut there. Okay, go to the next panel. So it was pose by pose, like every single pose in the story reel. I like sat and stared at the screen and put it together. So it was the most lived in creation of a film experience I've ever done, like from first moment of the stampede to the last breath, a year and a half later, was just like living with it 24/7. And so, it felt very involved and just had a tremendous group of people around me. And I didn't have to wait for like committee approval or show of hands or anything. It just, we'd be working one day and, somebody go, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And be like, yeah, maybe, maybe not. But then, somebody'd say something that just captured my fancy, and like, oh my God, that's great. It's in. In fact, you want to record it? Here, get to the microphone. Go, you're in. And just, there was no vetoing of that stuff later on. There was no committee to go to, which just was kind of the blessing and the curse of being like out in independent territory where there's like, you have no home. It's like, at the time, it's just blessed creative freedom. It's like, great, there's no committee to try to steer anything. But then, eventually when you get done and you realize you have absolutely no home, then, there's complications that happen with that. Just adrenaline pump excitement over the chance to finally do something creative and to just go with whatever was working was so exhilarating that kind of met the absolute stress of having to work slightly ahead of everything and have no opportunity to go back and do reworking or retakes or anything. You're just have one shot. So there was tremendous stress, but tremendous adrenaline pump. And I think just the adrenaline pump met the stress at the same level and made me and I think everyone else on my crew survive. And we wound up bonding so entirely. And, it's just, what a great family. We just stayed so close and felt like we, in a way, had gone through a similar adventure to the characters in the story. And I think that kept us relating to the situation. We would feel like we're sinking in the quicksand during the weeks that we're animating them sinking in the quicksand. And, I think there was this uncanny parallel psychology to our own crazy adventure and the adventure the characters were going through.
Chapter 4, The Voices.
Everything was going so well until I had the first sort of audition reading of character voices. And it was the first time I felt like I had just hit a wall. Everything else was like this delight of discovery and things working and creative sparks and being around so many great people and just all of us feeling a camaraderie in what we were doing. And it was just wonderful collaboration. And then suddenly it was like slam, like the words are coming out of the character's mouth and are just horrible. And it was like, I want to change the channel. I want to hit the screen. I want to choke somebody. And I was going, I know when I sat and wrote that on the screen, on my little K-Pro computer screen, the voice in my head was charming. It was not that. I know it's a better page of script than that. I know it sounds like horrible writing right now, but I really swear it's not. But what was going on, and I just sort of discovered that was that everybody involved in that initial reading came in and was going, oh, it's like, what a crazy thing. It's a radio talking, and they'd be like, I am the radio. And it was just all seeking the most artificial put on voices you could imagine. And it just was the kind of thing that had always made me want to hit characters. And so I was just kind of sitting there in a daze, and Joe Ramp goes, I'm taking some classes on the side at the Groundlings Improv Theater. They've got some really nice people that maybe you should listen to some of them, because I don't think they would treat it this way. So I said, great idea. So I went down and met everybody and then watched some of their improv, and I just saw them doing the opposite, where instead of them looking like as this first group of people had done, they had thought, what can I do to make this seem crazy and weird, because this is a crazy, weird story. So how do I take it to the crazy place? On the improv stage, you do the opposite. Their job was to say, take the craziest idea the audience throws at you and make it seem plausible. Like, that was their job. When I handed them the pages, they were genuine with it. They would think, well, how would a character feel? It would want to be warm. It would feel frustrated if it couldn't be warm. It would want to provide deliciousness to people, and it would get very frustrated if it couldn't. So they were looking for the core believable reality of things going on. And so that was great. So Lovett and Phil Hartman and Tim Stack and Deanna Oliver. And then I started really having their voices in my head, which gave me great confidence then. And they all really wanted to do it. And Lovett was like, well, I could do this character and I could do that one too. I could do this third character. I'm like, John, I love you for the radio. I just want you to do the radio, but I could do more. It's like, yeah, you're great at that. So, and he had done things like he had a character he did that was like a baseball announcer and stuff. And I just went, great. So I started drawing inspiration from who they were, from Deanna and John Lovitz, and I let their voices in my head influence how I continue to write the script.
Chapter 5, Production.
The rough storyboards, because we didn't have time to do pretty ones. It was just too pell-mell. In fact, we did them tiny. I would draw, I have the originals here, but I would draw maybe like 3 inches, like 2 by 4 inches or 3 by 5 inches, something like that, very small, and then blow them up on the Xerox machine and throw a little shading on it, but not do any more beautification of the lines or anything. But you line up those roughs with the final shots, and it really is a one-to-one match. I used to go to Brian McEntee and depend on him to respect those shots. And at the beginning, he was kind of expecting that other studios a lot of times would have storyboards be general and not shot specific. And then it would go to the layout department, and the head of layout would kind of go, well, maybe I'll do a wide shot here, maybe I'll do a close-up. And I went, well, no. I really come from the school of directing where the director chooses the shots, and this is the shot I want. But he's like, it's sort of, I think he felt at the beginning like I was sort of tying his hands and the department's hands. And I went, no. It's like, so I've chosen a wide angle, low angle shot on this, right? Take a look at this now. Make it more dynamic, like commit to that, but show me up, like make it a more dramatic low shot, make it a better perspective and everything. So then you go in and like, okay, I'll try to blow you out of the water with the better version of the shot. And he was great at that. So once he was like, okay, I'm not like inventing the shot, the director's doing that, but I'm trying to show him like the better version of that choice. And so we just got a wonderful cruise going, and he just was amazing to work with. There was a continuity where the idea, the rough idea at the very beginning, when we sit and look at it, and it's just the 4 of us boarding together, could pin up the boards and go, that's the movie. And when I put them in the story reel and time them, then we take little Xeroxes of those storyboards and attach them to the front of the envelope that was going out to the folder that was going out to the animators. And, we drew quite a few poses. So at least they get kind of the pose test of what the scene was supposed to be, instead of like a general, beautifully done layout, but no character specific. It was rough, but it was very much like, here's like 7 poses that happen in the scene, and all of them like timed out. So I think it gave everybody a head start. And when I was done with the film, I remember Peter Schneider, and I think it might have been Schumacher, but they asked me to come in to Disney and they had a meeting, and the main point of the meeting was them sitting on their half of the room going, "How did you do that?" Like, how did you get a 90-minute film done in a year and a half, soup to nuts, and with that kind of filmmaking and all that stuff? And so I explained to them about kind of a cohesive creative group and not going back to rehash things, and also making a commitment, like, what are you trying to do in this sequence, and what are the shots, and how are they timed? And instead of having it reinvented every time it goes to another department, and somebody goes, "Well, if I were making the film, I'd do this," and then it changes, and then it goes to another department. "Well, if I were making the film, I'd do this," and then you screen and you do notes and you go on and on. It was just like kind of make a decision, like, and everybody on board. Like, be collaborative. Don't be consensus, but be collaborative, and make commitments and stick to them, and realize that 6 months later, when you've seen the same joke for the 500th time, like, trust the first time you saw it and it made you smile. Like, that's what the audience experience is going to be. Don't get bored with your own work being too close to it and just start going, "Well, since I've seen it 500 times, I want a different joke." It's like, no, trust that first flash that happened.
Chapter 6, Theatrical Release.
Gosh, even though we never hit the theaters, we got such great reviews from theater critics. It was just Daniel Schweiger, the guy who wrote the liner notes, was pointing out that it was actually one of the best reviewed animated films of that decade. He said a lot of people think it's like Mermaid is the first one to get that kind of praise, and he went, "You're forgetting Toaster." We did get, we're blessed with just stacks of wonderful reviews. But ironic that film reviewers gave us such a high praise, and then we were not released in the theaters. But that is a battle story, which I could tell you. Well, we had a screening of Toaster at the Wadsworth Theater, and invited the press and the public in. Just a festival screening, and a lot of the high praise from super well-known film critics came out of that screening, and we got accepted at Sundance. And so I was really hoping that at Sundance we'd have a shot at getting distribution, because it was the kind of reviews that you dream of. And so I just thought, well, this great reviews plus screening at Sundance might equal distribution finally. There had been so many investors of small amounts, and Disney had been one of them, but the only thing they had bought the rights for was home video and the Disney Channel, and no other rights. And they didn't have merchandising or theatrical or any of that sort of stuff. So we really needed to find distribution. And in '88, we went to Sundance, and I think Schweiger was pointing out that it's the only animated film there for many, many years. But at that screening, it was really well received again, and people got up and gave it a thunderous applause and everything. And I was so excited by that, but I was such a novice at any of those kind of public things, and I just sort of listened to the applause and looked around and kind of waved at people like, "Thank you." But I was too intimidated to get up and give a speech. I did not take the opportunity to get up on stage and say, "Distribution, please." But still, which I should have done. But I had several of the Sundance judges come to me, and this happened 2 or 3 times. But a couple people, told me exactly the same thing. They said, behind closed doors, when we were talking about all the films and the awards that we're giving out, we agreed that you have the best film here this year. But if we give the award for the top film to a cartoon, we just don't think people will take Sundance seriously. So, but we just wanted you to know that even though the award's going to go to someone else, like in secret, we think you have the best film here. So, I was like, well, I guess, thank you, I guess. But anyway, despite that, Scurus Films came and sought me out and said they were an art house distributor, And they said, we really love your film, and this is not a film for kids. This is not a babysitting film. You guys made it for yourselves. You're like the 20-something crowd. They said, this is for college and young adult people, and we totally see releasing this in all our art house theaters and not worrying about any matinees. This is like a evening and late night kind of movie. And so we went, oh my God, they get it. Great. So despite me not getting up and giving the speech, they came and found us and wanted to do that. Now, Disney Channel had heard about me putting it in Sundance, and I had started to get word from them that their response was move up the release date sooner so that it would block my theatrical release that I might get. And I had started to really actively push back against that and say, wait a minute, it's going to make it more valuable for you if you wait until we get the theatrical release. But there was this move to do that. Once Gross was on board, I went, great, this is the lever to go back to them and say, see, it's not just Theatrical anymore. Here's the distributor. Let's all wait. Instead, their reaction was to go ahead and print material to go out to actually formally announce that it was going to happen sooner. So it was like a direct challenge. I met my still lawyer, Peter Nichols, at Sundance that year, and he said how much he had loved the film and asked me if I needed a lawyer. And I said, yeah, I actually do need a lawyer right now because of this distribution thing. It's like, can you please help me untangle this? And so he dug in and he came back to me and said, I've never seen this happen before, but the studio is willing to devalue a property that it owns by killing its theatrical release. Now, I knew why that was happening. It was because of the great reviews we had gotten, and the reviews would say things like sharper and wittier than anything coming from Disney, made in large part by ex-Disney people, but this is a whole family audience that proves that they still make films like they used to, like all this kind of praise that was not for Disney. And I actually wound up having a one-on-one phone call with Katzenberg asking him to please back off. And he's like, yeah, good luck, kid. We don't want to stand in your way. And I said, but you are standing in our way, in my way. You know, this is going to kill theatrical. I was like, good luck, kid. You know, he was very just, didn't want to hear it and wanted to do his chess move. And he did. So Spurus backed off. It killed our theatrical. I knew he was making the chess move of saying, look, if we swallow this project up and have it never appear in the theaters, all these great theatrical reviews won't matter because it won't be in the theaters. It will appear first on the Disney Channel. And then people go, oh, all those reviews belong to Disney. They're like positive Disney reviews. So it was a good chess move on his part, even though it was heartbreaking for us.
Chapter 7, The Legacy of the Brave Little Toaster.
Bless Tom Wilhite's heart, he went ahead and he and Willa Carroll found a way to get it just selectively released in a few art house theaters around the country here and there as they could. So a few people go like, oh yeah, I saw your film in a theater in this city. And anyway, that was a heartbreaker. And but I must say, after all of that, it's been so heartwarming after years of really having it be off my radar, except for just this amazing experience and just the warmth of the crew that I worked with and the warmth that I feel for the characters. And just to me, all of us sit around and are proud of what we did. Anytime we get a chance to see it, which is, years between, but we'll look back and go like, yeah, we're happy that we did that. And like, it was the raucous, unleashed version of us in our 20s. And it still makes us smile, and just to know that audiences found it somehow, that parents would give it to their kids. And we didn't make it for that. We didn't say, here's a video to hand to your child. We were making it for the parents. We were making it for the teens, and we were happy for kids to see it. We didn't make it for kids. But a lot of them just discovered it for the first time with the parents thinking it was a kid's movie. And then they would go like, oh my God, it scared the crap out of me. And then I started to hear from some of the fans who were growing up enough to have a second experience with it, told me this. And it happened once when at Cal State Northridge, Deanna Oliver and I had been invited to do a Q&A after a screening of Toaster for the college students. And they said that most of them said that this second discovery happened where they would see it as kids, and a lot of them were, as they described it, mesmerized and would watch it over and over and over again, but also described it as a dark film that terrified them, but they loved it anyway. And then they would meet other people in college that they'd say, "Oh, you saw Toaster too? Oh, let's go get a 12-pack and like watch Toaster tonight. It'll be nostalgia." And then they'd watch it and go like, "Oh, this is made for us now. This is for like a college age audience and young adult audience. Like, oh, I enjoy this film too." And I let them know, well, that's the film we made. It's like, so that your second discovery is the most accurate one. But we're glad you survived watching it as a kid too. And Deanna and I remember we were both just kind of startled that the word dark film kept coming up. And somebody actually asked, like, how did you make it so dark? And Deanna and I kind of looked at each other and we both said, well, we weren't trying to make a dark film. We were just trying to be honest to what the characters would be going through. And it's just, I was tired of the artifice of like fake emotions. And that always appealed to me. And back in the, when I was inspired growing up with Disney animation. And the thing that got to me was whether it was like really faithfully, beautifully rendered, like something like Pinocchio, or quickly put together like Dumbo, like Pinocchio versus Dumbo. Like both of them had absolute heart and believability. And so our feeling was with Toaster, like, let's do something that's not stiff and formulaic, and do something that's wild and unpredictable and uses growlings, improv people, but keeps all the heart. Like have these characters all believe in their world, believe in the situation they're in. And if they're in trouble, like they're sinking in quicksand, that's not a joke. That's death. And they should, at that moment, feel that horror. And in the audience, we should feel for them. So when they're all sinking in the quicksand and their cords are all tied because they were, trying to help Kirby along the vacuum, and he falls in and his weight is pulling them down. And there's that moment where the Toaster is screaming to Blanky to untie itself and to survive. And, Blanky says, "I'm not scared." And his voice quakes. Like he's terrified, but he's trying to make Toaster feel less bad. It's so having those moments ring true emotionally to me and to my whole acting team and the animators, that we always just accepted that. It's like, well, this should be honestly what it would feel like if you were then in that moment. So we weren't trying to make a dark film. We were just like, yeah, if you went through that, that would be absolutely horrible. And what would that look and feel like? And well, like this. And so we were just trying to be honest. There's a quote from David Edelstein that just I was so warmed by his comment. I have it here. David Edelstein, part of his review, he said, "The director Jerry Rees is a real filmmaker. Rees has storyboarded the film as if the Toaster and its comrades were actors instead of cartoons, and lo, they become so. There's nothing cartoonish about their heart."